Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a pretty crucial mission, actually. We're going to untangle a complex stack of sources, all focusing on the evolving landscape of justice, governance, and, well, digital challenges in India. This deep dive is tailor-made for you, designed to pull out the most vital insights and maybe some surprising facts from the material.
Yeah, and we'll be navigating a really wide array of topics, everything from how the Supreme Court wields some pretty extraordinary powers to the grassroots efforts in rural justice, and even how technology is reshaping law enforcement and the judiciary. It's quite a mix.
Definitely. We'll also touch on things like political parties, those electoral promises, freebies, and the regulation of global tech giants.
Exactly. Our goal is really to connect the dots for you, give you that aha moment, helping you understand not just what's happening, but why it truly matters, in a nation as complex and diverse as India.
Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack our first crucial area then. How India aims to protect its most vulnerable participants in the justice system. We're talking about the Witness Protection Scheme.
Right.
The core objective seems pretty clear. Protect witnesses in criminal cases, especially those who are absolutely critical to proving offenses. The goal being, ensuring fair trials and maintaining public faith in the whole justice system.
And that's so important because we've definitely seen, particularly in high-profile cases, this huge issue of witnesses turning hostile. Often it's because of threats, intimidation. It really undermines everything.
So tell us about the scheme itself. How did it come about?
Well, one striking aspect is its origin. It's actually an executive scheme, not a statutory law passed by Parliament. It came about following a Supreme Court directive back in 2018 pushing for nationwide adoption.
An executive scheme?
Yeah.
Interesting. So how does it work in practice?
It involves a pretty thorough threat perception assessment. They basically categorize witnesses into three groups. Category A is for serious threats to life, maybe family members too. Category B covers threats to safety, reputation, or property. And Category C is for more moderate threats.
Okay, and then the protection matches the category.
Exactly. Protection measures are tailored. It could mean police protection, sometimes relocation, or in extreme cases, even an identity change.
But I imagine the practical side, the implementation, must face some hurdles.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Considerable ones. A big one is the lack of resources and personnel in state police forces, which is especially concerning when you think about India's already, poor police-to-population ratio.
Right. That makes sense. Any other challenges?
Yeah, the scheme also has somewhat limited applicability. It mainly covers serious as crimes, which potentially leaves other witnesses who might still be at risk in different types of cases unprotected.
And does it actually stop the intimidation?
That's the thing. Despite this scheme, criminal intimidation often persists. Sometimes it's attributed to just weak law enforcement on the ground. And another point, going back to its origin, the absence of statutory authority, that formal legal backing, sometimes means agencies might not take it as seriously as perhaps they should.
Wow. So it really brings us to a fundamental question, doesn't it?
It does. How deeply does the vulnerability of witnesses undermine the very foundation of the rule of law in India? I mean, if those crucial to justice can't speak without fear, the entire system is compromised, right?
Absolutely. Okay, building on that, let's shift to another powerful tool, this time within the judiciary itself. Article 142 of the Indian Constitution.
Yes, Article 142, a fascinating one.
Explain its core power for us. What does it allow the Supreme Court to do?
Essentially, it empowers the Supreme Court to pass any order or decree necessary for doing complete justice in any matter that comes before it. Think of it as a way for the court to bridge legislative gaps or legal vacuums. It lets them act beyond just rigid interpretations of the written law,
So it's about ensuring justice, even when the existing laws might be silent or just not quite enough.
Precisely. It gives the court flexibility.
Can you give us some examples? The sources mentioned a few vivid ones.
Sure. The Ayodhya case is a major example. The court directed the allocation of alternative land for a mosque. It was seen as an innovative solution aimed at communal harmony, going beyond just the strict title dispute.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the Vishaka case. This was crucial. In the absence of any specific law at the time, the court issued guidelines against sexual harassment at the workplace. They linked it directly to the fundamental right to dignity under Article 21. The story of Banwari Devi was central to highlighting this need.
A landmark judgment, definitely.
Absolutely. Another example is the Salwa Judum case. Here, the court took suo motu cognizance.
Meaning on its own initiative, right, without a formal petition.
Exactly, suo motu. They moved to disband these untrained special police officers who were fighting Naxalism. Some were even minors, and casualties were severe. The court stepped in, citing human rights concerns.
And one more, regarding prisons.
Yes, in 2016, dealing with prison overcrowding. The court directed the release on bail for under-trials who had already served over half of their potential maximum sentence. Again, using Article 142 to address a systemic issue impacting fundamental rights.
So these examples paint a picture of the advantages. It seems Article 142 can ensure faith in institutions, fill those legal voids, allow for creative solutions, and enforce fundamental rights. Is that fair?
That's a very good summary of its strengths, yes. Its ability to step in, especially for fundamental rights, is vital. It offers that flexibility for innovative solutions, and when used well, it definitely reinforces public faith.
But there's always a but, isn't there? What's the flip side, the concerns?
There definitely is a flip side. This power, while vital, does invite concerns about potential judicial overreach. Critics worry it could violate the separation of powers between the judiciary, legislature, and executive. Well, when judicial orders effectively supersede legislation, it can create uncertainty in the law. It potentially disturbs the constitutional balance. There's also the risk of what some call judicial adventurism. Think of orders like mandating the national anthem in cinemas or closing liquor shops near highways. These decisions, while perhaps well-intentioned, tread into policy areas usually handled by the executive or legislature.
And the accountability issue.
That's critical. Judges lack direct democratic accountability. When they use Article 142 to exercise powers that look more executive or legislative, that lack of accountability becomes a real concern.
So given this potent power and the potential pitfalls, what's the suggested way forward? How do you balance it?
The consensus seems to lean towards increased judicial restraint, using the power sparingly and carefully. One suggestion is that major decisions under Article 142 should ideally be reviewed by larger benches, maybe even constitutional benches, for greater scrutiny. And fundamentally, the actions must always be grounded in sound legal principles, not just sort of judicial whim.
And who ensures this restraint?
Parliament. That's the tricky part. The general view is that the onus is really on the judiciary for self-regulation. Imposing statutory restrictions could risk constraining judicial independence, which is also crucial. So it's a delicate balancing act, largely for the court itself to manage.
Okay, very clear. Now, from those constitutional heights, let's zoom right down to the grassroots. Nyayalayas.
Yes, the village courts.
Established under the 2008 Act, often described as a Gandhian model for rural justice. What's the core idea here?
The big emphasis is on a conciliation-based approach, so focusing on negotiation, finding mutual consensus. Rather than the traditional adversarial method where two sides fight it out, it's meant to be less confrontational.
And how are they structured?
They're designed as mobile courts operating at the block or intermediate panchayat level. Each is headed by a Nyayalayas, that's a state judicial officer, same rank as a first-class magistrate, and they're assisted by social workers and lawyers, acting more like conciliators.
What kind of cases do they handle?
Their jurisdiction covers petty civil and criminal cases. Some not serious crimes like murder or anything requiring heavy sentences. Think minor disputes, small claims. And a key feature is their flexibility. They're not bound by the strict procedural laws like the new Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, BNSS, or the Indian Evidence Act. Instead, they operate based on principles of natural justice, fairness, basically.
The benefits seem pretty obvious then.
They are, at least in theory. Justice at the doorstep, that's huge for rural populations. It saves travel time and costs. The simpler procedures should mean quicker decisions. And the conciliatory approach, well, it often leads to greater satisfaction and better compliance because people feel they've reached an agreement.
But again, the implementation reality, does it match the vision?
Unfortunately, not really. This is where the challenges become significant. There's vast under-implementation. The target was around 2,500 gram Nyayalayas, but fewer than 500 have even been notified, and only about 300 are actually operational.
Wow, that's a huge gap. Is it consistent across the country?
No, there is significant regional disparity. Some states like Rajasthan and Maharashtra have done relatively well, but others like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar have seen very poor uptake. Funding has also been an issue. Central support was withdrawn after an initial period, leaving states to pick up the costs.
And the staffing. You mentioned judicial officers earlier.
Yes, that's another major bottleneck. There's an acute shortage of judicial officers willing or available to serve as Nyayalayas. This just compounds the existing problem of, high vacancy rates, sometimes around 50% in the regular district courts. It really highlights that gap between policy intention and what actually happens on the ground.
It certainly does. Okay, from Nyayalayas, let's talk about another type of specialized judicial body. Tribunals.
Right, tribunals. They exist alongside the regular court system.
What's their main purpose? Why were they set up?
Primarily to alleviate the burden on the regular courts, which are often overloaded. They're meant to offer more affordable, speedier, and expert dispute resolution in specific areas.
And where do they get their authority from?
Constitutionally, there are two key articles. Article 323A allows Parliament to set up administrative tribunals. These deal specifically with service matters for government employees, civil servants, public servants. That Article 323B allows for tribunals covering a range of other specified issues, things like rent control, labor disputes, taxation, company law, and so on.
So Parliament has to pass specific laws to create them.
Exactly. Like the Administrative Tribunals Act of 1985, which set up the Central Administrative Tribunal, CAT, and state administrative tribunals, SATs. Composition-wise, they usually include both judicial members, like retired judges, and technical or sector experts relevant to the tribunal's area. And like Nyayalayas, they generally follow principles of natural justice, not necessarily strict procedural codes.
Now, the crucial point that often comes up with tribunals is their independence, isn't it? Especially independence from the executive branch.
Absolutely critical. There have been key Supreme Court judgments on this. The Sampa Kumar case, and especially the L. Chandra Kumar case. These establish that tribunals, when they take over jurisdiction previously held by courts, must maintain equal independence and efficacy. They can't be seen as subordinate or less independent.
Okay, so the courts have emphasized independence, but despite that, what are the challenges they still face? Why are there ongoing concerns?
The concerns are multifaceted, unfortunately. A major recurring issue is the perceived dominance of the executive in the appointment process for some tribunals. This directly threatens the principle of separation of powers. It's particularly problematic when the government itself is often a major litigant before these very tribunals.
Right, that conflict of interest seems obvious.
It does. Then there's the issue of pendency. Despite being set up for speedy resolution, many tribunals are also plagued by persistent case backlogs. They also face significant infrastructure shortfalls, not enough courtrooms, inadequate support staff, and high vacancy rates among the members themselves, which obviously impacts their ability to function effectively.
And their administration?
Historically, many tribunals were administered by their parent ministries, the very ministries whose actions they might be reviewing. While steps have been taken to shift administration, these historical ties sometimes still raise concerns about their functional independence.
Quite a few hurdles there. Given these complexities in courts and tribunals, let's explore the alternatives. Alternate dispute resolution or ADR.
Yes, ADR is becoming increasingly important.
We generally talk about three main forms, right? Arbitration, conciliation, and mediation. And it seems recent legislation has really put a spotlight on mediation.
That's right. The Mediation Act of 2023 has given mediation a distinct legal framework, and this has led to some changes in the older Arbitration and Conciliation Act as well, particularly through amendments in 2024.
Okay, what are those key changes to the Arbitration Act?
Well, first, the specific provisions on conciliation have been removed from the Arbitration Act. They're now fully covered under the dedicated Mediation Act. This streamlines things. Second, there's a significant new provision for appointing an emergency arbitrator.
An emergency arbitrator, what's that for?
It allows parties to seek urgent interim relief, like an injunction, before the main arbitral tribunal is even formally constituted. This can be crucial in fast-moving situations. The amendments also strongly encourage the use of institutional arbitration administered by established bodies over ad hoc arbitration, which can be less predictable.
And there's a new council being set up.
Yes, the Arbitration Council of India. Its role will be to grade arbitral institutions, frame rules, and generally promote and regulate arbitration in the country, aiming for more consistency and quality. Technology is also formally incorporated. Things like using video conferencing for hearings are now explicitly recognized. And finally, there's the introduction of an arbitration appellate tribunal for handling appeals against arbitrator decisions, though likely only on limited grounds.
So, pulling all these reforms together, what's the intended benefit for the ADR landscape in India?
The main goals are streamlining the processes, making them faster and more efficient, enhancing trust and consistency, especially through institutional arbitration, providing that prompt interim relief via emergency arbitrators, and using technology and oversight bodies like the Council to increase access, transparency, and overall reliability of ADR mechanisms. It's about making India a more attractive hub for arbitration.
Okay, moving on. Here's a statistic that always surprises me. The government is the single largest litigant in India.
It is, often involved in a huge percentage of cases clogging the courts.
And apparently a large chunk, maybe over 70% by some estimates, of government-initiated cases are deemed frivolous or unnecessary.
That figure is often cited, yes, which is precisely why the National Litigation Policy and the recent Government Litigation Directive are so important. Their core purpose is pretty straightforward. Decrease the number of unnecessary cases started by the government. The aim is to reduce that massive judicial backlog and, of course, save taxpayer money being spent on avoidable litigation.
So what are these directives actually telling government departments to do?
They're quite comprehensive, aimed at the union government ministries, though states can adopt them too. They mandate creating dedicated legal cells within each department, staffed with experts. Each department needs to appoint a nodal legal officer to oversee litigation strategy and decisions. There's a big emphasis on capacity-building legal training for government officials, maybe using platforms like the IGOT Karmyogi initiative for civil servants.
And trying to stop cases before they even start.
Exactly. A key focus is on strengthening internal grievance redressal mechanisms. The idea is to resolve disputes, especially with employees internally, rather than letting them escalate to court. And for arbitration cases involving the government, there's a plan to develop an e-portal for better management and tracking, more transparency.
What are the hoped-for outcomes, the big picture?
Ideally, enhance public trust because the government is seen as a more responsible litigant. Better governance efficiency overall. It should free up civil servants to focus on their main job, service delivery, instead of being tied up in court battles. And ultimately, contribute to faster, better managed justice delivery for everyone by simply reducing the sheer volume of government cases in the system.
Right. Now let's shift gears again, this time to technology's impact. Artificial intelligence in the judiciary and law enforcement. It sounds futuristic, but it's happening now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. AI is quietly starting to transform operations in the judiciary. Think about case management. AI can help optimize scheduling hearings, allocating cases to benches, maybe even prioritizing them based on urgency or how old they are. Some even suggest it could help address those tricky allegations of bias in how case rosters are prepared by making the process more data-driven.
What about during the proceedings?
AI-enabled transcription is becoming a reality. Getting accurate, quick transcripts of hearings aids transparency, but also legal education training new lawyers or judicial officers. And we can't forget translation. The Supreme Court's ESER portal uses AI to translate judgments into various vernacular languages, making justice more accessible.
Okay, and in law enforcement, how is AI being used there?
The potential is huge, though also raises questions. Predictive policing is one area. AI analyzes crime data, social media trends, surveillance feeds, trying to anticipate where crime might occur or even identify potential radicalization patterns.
And surveillance itself.
Enhanced surveillance, yes. Drones equipped with AI, AI-driven cameras in public spaces that can use facial recognition to potentially identify known offenders. And in forensics, AI can assist with things like virtual crime scene reconstruction or modeling different scenarios to help investigators analyze evidence.
It all sounds incredibly powerful, but the challenges and ethical concerns must be massive too.
They are absolutely paramount. Privacy and data protection are huge concerns, especially with increased surveillance. Then there's the very real risk of bias. AI systems learn from data, and if that data reflects existing societal biases, the AI can inherit and even amplify them. This could lead to unfair outcomes like discriminatory profiling or wrongful identification.
Accuracy is also an issue, right? False positives.
Definitely. AI isn't perfect. Issues with accuracy and reliability, like false positives and facial recognition, can have serious consequences. And fundamentally, there's a need for extensive capacity building, training people to use these tools responsibly. And crucially, maintaining human oversight. AI can be a powerful tool and assistant, but for now, it cannot and should not fully replace human judgment in these critical decisions. It's about augmentation, not replacement.
A really important distinction. Okay, let's switch tracks completely now and look at the foundations of the political system itself. Internal party democracy.
A really crucial topic, often overlooked.
Define it for us. What does it actually mean?
It essentially refers to the fair, impartial, and transparent functioning within a political party. This includes things like genuine, transparent elections for party leadership positions, democratic processes for making policy decisions within the party, and ensuring that diverse viewpoints inside the party are actually considered and valued, not just suppressed by the leadership.
Why is this so important? It's internal party stuff, right?
It might seem internal, but its importance is profound for the broader democratic health of the country. When parties function democratically internally, it strengthens democracy overall. It embeds that culture. It increases public trust in political parties and can lead to broader citizen participation. It's also seen as crucial for preventing the concentration and abuse of power within parties.
How does it affect who gets into politics?
That's key. It can enhance representation by ensuring different factions and groups have a voice. Some argue it helps reduce the criminalization of politics by making entry based more on merit than just loyalty or influence. And it can open up opportunities for younger people and new leaders to rise through the ranks rather than having entrenched hierarchies.
Sounds vital. But what are the challenges? Why isn't it always the reality?
The challenges are significant. First, the legal framework is quite weak. The Election Commission, for instance, doesn't currently have the explicit power to deregister a party just because it lacks internal democracy.
And within the parties themselves?
Leadership elections are often, well, opaque. Sometimes they seem predetermined. There's often a powerful high command culture where decisions come from the top down. Party decisions can also be heavily influenced by money and muscle power, or by what some call cult politics around a single leader, rather than real democratic debate. Internal factionalism exists, of course, but the anti-defection law, while aimed at stability, can sometimes discourage MPs or MLAs from openly debating or disagreeing with a party line.
So how can this be improved? It seems like a deep-rooted issue.
Recommendations have come from bodies like the Law Commission and the National Commission to review the working of the Constitution, NCRWC. They've suggested empowering the Election Commission more, perhaps giving it that power to deregister non-compliant parties, and calls for a comprehensive Political Parties Registration and Regulation Act that would mandate certain internal democratic procedures.
But can laws alone fix it?
Probably not entirely. Genuine internal party democracy likely requires voluntary reforms from within the parties themselves, and sustained societal pressure demanding more transparency and accountability from parties. Things like open primary elections for choosing candidates or leaders, like in some other democracies, are often held up as an ideal. But that would require a major cultural shift within Indian political parties.
A complex challenge indeed. Okay, let's tackle another hot button issue, especially around election time. Freebies.
Ah, yes, the debate over electoral promises.
How do we define them? What exactly counts as a freebie?
Generally, they're seen as welfare measures or items, goods, services, subsidies, loan waivers promised and often provided by political parties, particularly in the run-up to elections.
There are arguments for them, though, aren't there? It's not always clear cut.
That's true. Supporters argue they help meet evolving basic needs in society. They might fulfill some of the constitutional goals outlined in the directive principles of state policy, which encourage the state to promote welfare. And some argue they actually increase political engagement, especially among marginalized communities who feel they benefit directly.
Okay, but then the arguments against them seem pretty strong, too.
They are, and often come from economists and fiscal conservatives. A key argument is that it's often bad economics, focusing on distributing private goods, like TVs or mixers, instead of investing in public goods, like infrastructure or education, and that this kind of welfare can become unsustainable in the long run.
Unsustainable how?
By placing huge fiscal burdens on state finances. We've seen examples where populist promises contribute to debt crises. Some freebies can also have negative environmental impacts depending on what's being given. There's the argument they create dependencies among beneficiaries, reducing incentives for productivity. And politically, they can be very hard to reverse once implemented, tying the hands of future governments.
And the bribery aspect?
Yes, the concern is that they can blur the line with electoral bribery, potentially distorting the level playing field between parties and unduly influencing voters. It raises this fundamental tension, doesn't it, between short-term welfare gratification and long-term investment in public goods and capabilities.
What's the legal position on this? Have the courts weighed in?
Yes, the Supreme Court has looked at this. It ruled that pre-election promises aren't considered electoral bribery under current law if they are promised universally, to everyone or a whole class, rather than targeted at individual voters. Following court directives, the Election Commission now requires parties, under the Model Code of Conduct, to make promises that are economically feasible and explain how they'll be funded.
But does that stop it?
Not entirely.
Yeah.
Competitive welfarism or competitive populism seems to persist. Parties often feel pressure to outbid each other. Which brings us back to the question of solutions.
What are they?
Many argue that political parties themselves need to exercise self-regulation and restraint. Easier said than done, perhaps. But a crucial shift in emphasis is often suggested, moving away from just giving fish, providing consumables towards teaching fishing, meaning focusing more on empowering people through things like skill development, education, better healthcare, job creation, things that build long-term capability and independence.
A shift from handouts to empowerment. Makes sense. Okay, next up, the Delimitation Commission. This is about how political representation gets mapped out, literally.
Exactly. It's about drawing the boundaries of electoral constituencies.
Explain its role. When is it constituted, and what does it do?
It's typically constituted after each census, based on constitutional provisions like Article 82 and the specific Delimitation Act passed by Parliament for that round. Its main job is twofold. First, allocate the number of seats in the Lok Sabha, Parliament, to different states based on their population. And second, redraw the boundaries of parliamentary and state assembly constituencies within each state.
And the guiding principle.
The key principle is one person, one vote, meaning the population within each constituency should be as nearly equal as practicable within a state, ensuring roughly equal representational value for each vote.
Who sits on this commission?
It's usually a three-member body, chaired by a serving or retired Supreme Court judge. It also includes the Chief Election Commissioner, or another election commissioner nominated by the CEC, and the State Election Commissioner of the state, whose boundaries are being redrawn.
Now, this process sounds technical, but it gets really interesting and controversial when we look at the challenges, right?
Extremely interesting and politically very sensitive. Gerrymandering is one classic concern.
Manipulating boundaries to favor the ruling party.
Precisely. Drawing lines in convoluted ways to concentrate opposition votes in fewer seats or spread the ruling party's vote efficiently across many seats. But perhaps the biggest challenge looming for the next delimitation in India relates to population growth disparities.
So?
Well, the number of seats allocated to states has been frozen based on the 1971 census population figures for decades now, mainly to encourage family planning. But since 1971, population growth rates have varied hugely across states. Northern states have generally grown much faster than southern states. So if the next delimitation allocates seats based on current population, states in the South, which were arguably more successful in population control, stand to lose political representation relative to the North.
That sounds like it could create huge political friction.
Immense friction. It risks exacerbating the existing North-South political divide. There's also the counterargument. Delaying reallocation based on current population violates the one-person, one-vote principle, as constituencies in faster-growing states now have vastly more voters than those in slower-growing ones. Finding a way to compensate states for population control while upholding equal representation is a massive dilemma.
And accurate data is key too, I assume.
Absolutely. Having accurate, reliable, and recent population data is fundamental to the whole exercise. Delays in census operations can complicate this.
So, connecting this to the bigger picture, what's the path forward? How do you conduct delimitation fairly given these explosive issues?
It requires extremely careful handling. Robust pre-report consultation with all stakeholders, political parties, state governments, civil society is crucial. The Commission needs to find a delicate equilibrium, balancing those demographic principles of equal population with broader concerns about fairness, interstate equity, and ultimately national unity. It's not just a technical exercise, it's deeply political and has huge implications for the country's federal structure and social cohesion.
A very complex task ahead. Okay, for our final topic, let's dive into the digital frontier, the regulation of big tech companies.
Yes, the Googles, Amazons, Metas of the world, a huge area of focus globally and in India too.
What's the basic rationale for regulating them? Why the concern?
Several reasons. First, their sheer market power. These companies often dominate their respective digital markets. This leads to concerns about anti-competitive practices, things like predatory pricing to kill off smaller rivals, or biasing their platforms like search results or product recommendations to favor their own services. This harms competition and consumer choice.
And the data aspect.
Huge. They handle vast amounts of sensitive personal data. This raises major concerns about user privacy, data security breaches, and how that data is potentially monetized or misused. There's also the issue of misinformation and harmful content spreading rapidly on these platforms, which can impact everything from public health to electoral processes and even national security.
So what are the specific legal or regulatory gaps that need addressing in the Indian context?
Well, the existing Competition Act, passed back in 2002, wasn't really designed for the complexities of digital markets. It struggles to effectively tackle issues like network effects or data monopolies. Data jurisdiction is another challenge. Often, user data might be stored on servers outside India, making it harder for Indian law enforcement or regulators to access it when needed. And while India now has the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, its effective implementation and enforcement across these global platforms will be key. Before that, the lack of a comprehensive law really heightened consumer vulnerability.
What about specific types of content, like obscenity or material harmful to minors?
That's a major concern too. Digital and OTT, over-the-top streaming platforms, can disseminate content that might be considered offensive, indecent, or harmful, particularly to children. The Constitution, under Article 19(2), does allow for reasonable restrictions on free speech in the interest of decency or morality. And existing laws like the IT Act, the Indecent Representation of Women Act, and parts of the Cinematograph Act do address obscenity in the digital space to some extent. But there's an ongoing debate about needing more robust content rating systems, age verification, and parental controls, especially for OTT platforms.
Finding the right regulatory approach seems tricky, though. You don't want to stifle innovation, do you?
Exactly. That's the core challenge. Overregulation could potentially stifle innovation, hamper the growth of the digital economy, and even impinge on freedom of expression, leading to fears of censorship. So instead of just heavy-handed government control, there's been support for a more nuanced, co-regulatory or self-regulatory approach. The IT rules, 2021, for example, prescribe a multi-tier arrangement.
How does that work?
It starts with platforms having their own in-house grievance redressal mechanisms. Then there's a level of self-regulatory bodies formed by the industry or consortiums of platforms for appeals. And finally, there's an oversight mechanism involving an interministerial committee from relevant government departments. The idea is to create a system that balances accountability and user safety with maintaining an open and dynamic digital environment. It's an ongoing evolution finding that right balance.
It certainly is, wow. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We've covered a huge amount of ground, journeyed through the intricate mechanisms of justice delivery, the nuances of democratic processes like internal party democracy and freebies, and right up to the cutting-edge challenges posed by AI and regulating big tech.
Yeah, from ensuring witness safety right at the start to reimagining electoral promises, it's really clear that India's governance landscape is just constantly adapting, constantly in flux.
What truly stands out for me is how these seemingly disparate topics, a specific Supreme Court judgment, a new AI tool, the rules for a village court, they all somehow connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They converge on this central theme of a really dynamic nation striving for better governance, better justice in what is, let's face it, an ever more complex world. It's a good reminder, isn't it, that every policy, every legal decision, no matter how small it seems, can have pretty profound implications for our daily lives.
So what does this all mean for you, our listeners? It means being informed is genuinely empowering. Maybe think about what new insight from today's deep dive stuck with you. How might it reshape your understanding of the forces at play in society?
We really hope this discussion has given you a richer, maybe more nuanced understanding of these critical issues.
And perhaps spark some new questions for your own continued learning. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Just hanging out over coffee and you ask me
Executive to effectively make laws, which really blurs the lines between executive and legislative functions.
Right. Lawmaking should be Parliament's job.
Primarily, yes.
No.
Also, ordinances often lack parliamentary scrutiny. They're frequently passed in haste